Welcome to Smell of Page. The Treasure Box, written by Sarojini Sinha. Chapter 2. The next day, Ayodhya Prasad and his family were busy because Chamba's husband, Kedarnath, arrived from Meerut. He was a handsome young boy of 17 and was dressed in chudidar, pajama and achkan, embroidered with gold thread. Ayodhya Prasad and Rukmini welcomed their son-in-law and made arrangements for his stay. Food was served in the silver dishes. After lunch, they retired to Thekana, where it was cold even on the hottest day. In the evening, there was a grand feast, to which friends, neighbors, and relatives were invited. Cooks from the best sweetmeat shops were engaged, and they made food in the courtyard over huge logs of wood. After 2 days of feasting and entertainment, it was time for Kedarnath and Chamba to leave. Sweets were packed in round bamboo baskets, which were dyed green and red and covered with gold-bordered yellow cloth. Chamba felt so distressed at having to leave her parents and her childhood home that she wept her heart out. So Kedarnath told Govind, "Please come with me to my house. Your presence there will comfort your sister." Govind liked the idea of visiting Meerut, and with his father's permission, got ready to accompany them. Rukmini embraced her daughter and bade her farewell in the inner room, and then stood behind the chick and watched her get into palanquin. It was very hot, and poor Chamba was almost stifled in her heavy silk sari and rich jewelry. Her face was covered and her thin frame shook with sobs as she took leave of her sisters Tara and Maya and younger brothers Jagannath, Gopal and Munna. Ayodhya Prasad stood at the gate to see his daughter off. He was a fine figure of a man, and though almost 40, still looked young and handsome. Govind did not know it, but this was the last time he was seeing his father. As he followed Chamba's decorated palanquin, Govind felt light-hearted. The sturdy palanquin bearers, chanting a chorus, maintained a steady pace as they hurried along. Crossing the Yamuna by the bridge of boats, they turned north on the metalled road to Meerut. Govind was received warmly by Kedarnath's people. His father, Baijnath, would not let him return to Delhi in a hurry. "This is your first visit here, Govind," he said, "and you can't leave us so soon." Baijnath owned a textile store. It was a family business, and Baijnath, Kedarnath, and various cousins and nephews helped to run the shop, which was in the old town. The narrow streets and the lanes of Meerut were very much like those of Delhi. But Delhi was bigger, with more streets and bazaars. Besides the palace of Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar and the imposing houses of nobles and rich merchants, Meerut, with a cantonment, was a center of British power. The sepoys employed by the East India Company lived here along with British soldiers. As there were no shops in the cantonment, the soldiers did their shopping in the bazaars of old city. From the conversation of the sepoys who came to Baijnath's shop, Govind learned that they hated the foreigners. He again heard of the greased cartridges and how determined the sepoys were not to use them. One day, a sepoy, Shyam Singh, and his friend Abdul Aziz Khan were discussing East India Company. Abdul said, "We shouldn't have allowed the Firangis to become so powerful." Shyam Singh remarked, "It wouldn't have happened if our Rajas and Maharajas hadn't been fighting one another and the Emperor. If we unite even now, we can drive them out." Govind was reminded of the conversation between Chindamani and his father. Ayodhya Prasad was a patriot, but Baijnath was interested only in his business and in making money. "Shh," he said, looking about him. "What kind of talk is this? Both of you are shippoys of the company, and it's your duty to be loyal." Abdul was a handsome young man of 20 or so. He was well built, with a cheerful countenance. "We didn't accept the company's service to lose our religion," he retorted. To change the topic, Baijnath said, "Perhaps the two of you would like to buy brass buttons and brights for your uniforms. If so, I have another shop where you can get them." The two men did want buttons and brights but did not know where the other shop was. Govind wanted to hear more of the young man's talk and said eagerly, "I will show you where it is." On the way, Shyam Singh and Abdul Aziz Khan spoke of the 85 shippoys of Meerut who had refused to use the greased cartridges. They were sentenced to 10 years hard labor after having been disgraced before our 1,000 Indian and British officers and men. Their uniforms were slashed from behind the bayonets, their front buttons ripped off, and fetters hammered around their ankles. Govind, who had been intently listening, was touched to the quick. "You shouldn't have allowed your comrades to be disgraced in this way. Had I been there, I would have turned my gun on the foreign soldiers." Shyam Singh frowned, but Abdul laughed and clapped Govind on his back. "You are a brave lad," he said. "But had you been there, you couldn't have done that. The Francis are clever. They were fully armed, while the shippoys had guns without ammunition." By then, they had reached Kedarnath's other shop. As Abdul and Shyam Singh entered it, Govind had to part company with them. The news of fettering of the shippoys spread like wildfire in the Meerut, and shippoys and civilians alike simmered with anger. And suddenly in the evening the cry arose, to horse, let's ride to the jail and free our brothers." The shippoys rushed to the jail and freed their 85 comrades they sent for blacksmiths who cut the fetters with hammer and chisel. Afterwards, the shippoys attacked the British officers and men. They looted and burned their houses. Even women and children were not spared. Then they rode towards shippoys' lines and set fire to the thatched huts. Soon the whole cantonment was a sea of flames. News of the trouble spread to the town, and people took shelter in their houses. Shopkeepers hurriedly put up the shutters. Baijnath, Kedarnath, and others went home to take care of their families, their valuables, and other possessions. Govind was too excited to remain indoors. In the confusion, he slipped out of the house and, drawn by the cries and shouts and the spreading fire, walked towards the cantonment. When he drew closer, he could hear the clatter of hoofs, the clang of steel scabbards, and the bugle sounding the alarm. As he stood undecided, not knowing what to do, 2 British soldiers came riding out of the darkness. In their headlong rush, one of them got caught in the loop of a telegraph wire which had been cut by raiders and fell headlong from his horse. The other saw Govind and rode towards him, drawn sword in hand. Govind shrank back, thinking it was the end of him. Just then a trooper came charging. The British soldiers spurred his horse round and vanished into the surrounding gloom. The trooper reined his horse and asked, "What are you doing here? Don't you know it's risky to be around?" Govind thanked the trooper for saving his life. The man peered at him and exclaimed, "Oh, you are the brave shopkeeper, aren't you?" Govind too recognized the rider. "Abdul Aziz Khan," he cried.